Let's talk this brand new 2025 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-14R. From where you're sitting, you can probably easily find out where the word Ninja is printed on this motorcycle. It's in white lettering way up there on the maroon fairing. And with a little bit more effort, you can probably also find out where the word Kawasaki is badged on this motorcycle. It's right here on this matte black gas tank, printed in matte black. But what you're probably not going to find is where the words ZX-14R are badged on this motorcycle. And they're back here. Not facing you, facing me. Because Kawasaki had enough space and real estate back here to place these two huge badges facing up at the rider. That's because there are two 4-inch platforms for absolutely no reason back here on this motorcycle surrounding this massive bulge, which itself is bigger than my head, right next to a tail light that's big as my entire hand and has enough space left atop it that Kawasaki could place a third Kawasaki badge back there. All of its 8 letters in huge font on the tail light. That speaks to how massive this motorcycle is, and more importantly, how old it is. This is a design characteristic that was prevalent about 20-25 years ago, and that's exactly the era this motorcycle is from. Some Suzuki Gixxers have that design philosophy, and Hayabusas do, and so does this motorcycle, because these are all outdated bikes. Not just how they look, but their performance too. You see, this motorcycle is from an era that motorcycle manufacturers only knew of one way to make a motorcycle faster. Not through the use of aerodynamics or through the use of using maybe carbon fiber or aluminum or lighter materials in the construction of this bike. No, by jam-packing as much cc's as they could into the engine of a motorcycle. The result? This bike that weighs 600 pounds and has 1,441 cc's in its engine, getting it a 200 horsepower figure right between your two legs. And we're going to take a look at it today. We're going to go wheel to wheel and everything in between on this brand new 2025 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-14R, relic of an older era, just assembled in 2025, and see for about $17,599, a seemingly steep price, what you're expected to get in 2025. And then we're gonna get on it, go out there, put every one of those 1,441 cc's on this bike to test and see how maneuverable it is at 600 pounds. And then I'm gonna quantify my thoughts and see how it stacks up against everything else I've reviewed by giving it the Emi Score. Let's go. Let's start off by talking about what gives this motorcycle its fame and its cult following, similar to the Hayabusa. It's the massive, naturally aspirated engines they have. This 1,441 cc liquid-cooled inline 4-cylinder engine here that makes about 200 horsepower and about 117 foot-pounds of torque. Some say, though, the charm of this motorcycle has been taken away from it because it no longer has the title of the fastest Kawasaki out there. Following, the introduction of the H2 family in 2015, the H2, the H2 Carbon, and the H2R, and the ZH2, and the H2 SXSE, those motorcycles, although have a smaller cc engine, with the help of the supercharger, they all make more horsepower and torque than this motorcycle does, but they also cost a lot more, and they are less reliable. So, is this motorcycle completely irrelevant today? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm still sure there are people out there who find this engine very suitable for their activities. If they're drag racing, this is a highly modifiable engine, similar again to the Hayabusa, whereas you can't really tweak around much with the supercharged engines of the H2s. They're still great modifying bikes, but there are more issues, especially with the intercooler and other components of those engines that have to be heavily modified, and it's a lot more expensive to achieve the same pretty much performance that this motorcycle can achieve. That's why it's still sought after. People still want to buy it. That's the reason why in 2025 Kawasaki is still making this engine. But it's void of any technologies. It doesn't have an adjustable engine brake control. It doesn't have that 4-axis IMU, Bosch IMU. It's connected to a simple 6-speed manual transmission, no quick shifter up or down. It doesn't have launch control. It doesn't have anything really. No computer governance of any sort. Managing this engine, which again is another reason people like this. None of the H2 lineup from Kawasaki is this simple to deal with. They all have a lot of computers intertwined with every component down here. So this engine is still relevant, I believe. It's as relevant as the day it came out, really. If you think it was a ridiculous engine the day it came out, it's still ridiculous. If you think it was a cool engine when it came out, it's still a cool engine because it's a large, very output driven engine. 200 horsepower is a lot of power for a motorcycle, even though it weighs 600 pounds. But anyways, I digress. This engine is connected to these 4 pipes that come out, and one cool thing is you don't see a massive catalytic converter down here, like unlike any other Kawasaki that the pipes come out here and there's a huge bulge down there being the catalytic converter. You don't see that here. Now that's because every generation of the ZX-14R did something different with the catalytic converter. Some of them had the catalytic converter right before the pipe splits to 2 to go to each muffler. Some of them have 2 catalytic converters, one half the size of a regular catalytic converter in each muffler already built into it. But I believe now in this generation, if you cut open the little piece of pipe right before it splits in half, you're going to see some preliminary, a little bit of filtering here and there, but not to the level of a catalytic converter. And the catalytic converters are in fact in each muffler. And that's right, this motorcycle does have a dual exhaust system, one on each side of the motorcycle, which I suspect adds a little bit to the weight. Why it's 600 pounds could also be because of the 2 exhaust mufflers. Again, it's design staple of 20 years ago. Nobody does that anymore. Every sport bike now has just a tiny muffler come out one side. This motorcycle has 2 massive, one on each side. And now it's time to hear how the ZX-14R sounds. Now let's move on to the design characteristics of this motorcycle. I consider the ZX-14R one of Kawasaki's most iconic motorcycles due to, I mean, just look at it. 6 headlights up here covering this triangular air intake valve above a similarly shaped windscreen. Once you look at this shape, you will never forget how the ZX-14R looks. I mean, just drawing very simple shapes on a piece of paper of 6 circles and a triangle in between them has become pretty much the symbol of the ZX-14R. No other motorcycle is this easily identified than the ZX-14R, and the characteristic continues all around the motorcycle. You go to the sides and you see these very defined fins on the side of the motorcycle, and you go to the back and of course you encounter the butt that I mentioned at the start of the video, those huge shelves and the huge turn signals and the brake light. Now, speaking of the lights, let me run you through all the lights because this motorcycle has 9 of them. Let's see what they are. Starting up here, these 2 bulges up here are your day running lights. And they are placed in a particular way that they can either be seen from the front or from the side. So if you're driving alongside a car at night on the freeway, they just look over their shoulders and they can see you because these lights are also shining sideways. Moving in, the next 2 lights are your high beams, and when you move further in, these 2 are your headlights. Moving down from them, you have the turn signals, and when you go to the back, the outer 2 are turn signals, the middle one is your brake lights. Amongst all these lights, only the brake light is LED. Nothing else is LED. They are all halogen bulbs. Considering this design came out in 2005, it's a pretty advanced look. You gotta understand what motorcycles looked back in 2005. Most of them were round, like this motorcycle, no sharp edges really. But the problem I had with most motorcycles from that era, other than certain few like Ducatis or MV Agustas, the motorcycles that all had dual headlights like that, one of them was dedicated to the headlight and the other one to the high beam. And the result of that was that one light was always off, the other one was always on, and non-motorcyclists would always ask the riders, hey, I think one of your headlights is out. and it would become frustrating over the years. Whereas this motorcycle never had that issue because it's symmetrical. Both lights are on when your high beam, your low beam is on, and both of the other outer lights are on when the high beam is on. So the design was relatively advanced for its time, although now it perhaps might be a little outdated, but it's salvaged by the fact that it has essentially become an icon, and it's now at this point unchangeable. Kawasaki can't really do anything with this design, otherwise it loses the cult following that this motorcycle has. But overall, this motorcycle looks pretty nice. The color that's on this motorcycle, I could never memorize it because at first I thought there are 3 color options available for the 2025 models, but that's not the case. It's one color, one livery perhaps, consisting of 3 colors. And those colors are the metallic matte sovereign red that you see everywhere, metallic flat spark black, and metallic matte graphite gray. Speaking of hardware, you are spending $18,000 on this motorcycle, so you better be getting some good stuff. For front brake, Kawasaki has opted in for Brembos, which I over the years have figured out that, yeah, they're fine, they're nice. They definitely sound premium, but they're really no better than the Nissin brakes that Kawasaki offers on some other motorcycles. At least recent years, maybe older Nissins were more inferior than Brembos were superior, but nowadays they're almost indistinguishable to me. It is a 600-pound motorcycle, so brakes are important, and we're going to test them on our test ride if these brakes work pretty well. If I don't say anything about the brakes during our ride, know that they were good enough. Because usually when brakes are bad is when I notice them and I say, uh-oh, these brakes are spongy or they don't work well. So we'll see on our test ride how these brakes function, but they're Brembo, so we expect them to be pretty adequate for this motorcycle. As far as the shocks go, these front suspensions are no-name brands. So there's some sort of in-house Kawasaki brands. I know the rear ones are Unitrack. Unitrack is Kawasaki's in-house brand. They manufactured, they did the research and innovation, the research and development for those, and they are fantastic suspensions. Both front and rear suspensions are fully adjustable. Preload, damping, all those parameters can be adjusted on these suspensions, so that's good. The front suspensions, I believe, are 4.6-inch travel, and the rear one is a 5-inch travel suspension. So pretty adequate for the applications of this motorcycle, which is going to be probably track or drag racing. Super nice suspensions, and again, I'll report during our ride how they work. This motorcycle is also equipped with ABS. It's a must-have on a $18,000 motorcycle that weighs 600 pounds and has 200 horsepower. It's a must-have to have ABS, so I'm glad it has it. And it also has traction control, 3 levels of it. Level 1 is the least intervening one, and level 3 is the most intervening traction level. So pretty awesome. But other than that, this motorcycle has nothing else. It doesn't have launch control. It doesn't have wheelie control. It doesn't have any of those fancy other techs that you might even have on your motorcycle and have never used them before. So this motorcycle doesn't come with to begin with. Now let's move up here to the dashboard, where you're going to be staring at about 90% of your ownership of this motorcycle. So it's important to discuss what we're seeing here. I feel refreshed looking at what I'm looking here. In the past, I've been riding, all kinds of motorcycles, anything from scooters to super sports and hyper sports and adventure motorcycles and cruisers and motorcycles that have varied from $4,000 to $40,000, and they all share one thing. Nowadays, there's a handlebar here and a huge TFT screen up there, and that's it. It's just mounting an iPad or a tablet to the front of the motorcycle. It's void of character. It's just a screen. You can never tell how much the motorcycle costs from the TFT. You can never tell how fast the motorcycle is. What is the intention of the designer from that motorcycle? It's a boring little screen like every cell phone out there, every smartphone out there. But this is different. When you have steam gauges here, where you have a physical dial moving over specific fonts that they have picked for the numbers, each meaning something else. A classic font for classic older motorcycles, a sharp font for a fun, sporty motorcycle. Everything is intentional here. The background looks like a carbon fiber texture background, meaning it's going to be sporty. The little metallically engraved Kawasaki logo in between the gauges, it's also creative and artsy. It's not like those TFT screens void of character and art. This is what I like to see on motorcycles. It's really refreshing. But aside from how pretty and unique this now looks in 2025, There is this little LCD screen in between the two steam gauges, which is critical here. It's really important because screens, although I'm, bad-mouthing behind their back, they do truly provide lots of information in the space given, because you can keep going through pages and pages of information in them. So it's important that Kawasaki used at least a little bit of that technology here, which is up there. I call this the church window, because if you look at it closer, it kind of looks like those windows on a church. These 4 little windows on that side, 4 more on the other side, and a big one in the center. And the LCD is not actually touching this glass. It's about an inch inset into this dashboard, which overall creates a pretty cool little environment, atmosphere here, especially if you're looking at this at night. And one cool thing is when you start this this LCD up, guess what it does? It does exactly what I explained earlier in the design. It shows you a little simple way of 6 little circles and eyebrows above them, mimicking the front of this motorcycle, because Kawasaki too knows how iconic the front look of this motorcycle is. And they've done it in the startup sequence of this little LCD screen. Now, when I first looked at this bulge here in the back, I was like, this has gotta be some storage compartment. So let's find out what it is. Here's the key. We put it in the hole back here. I might have to put the microphone down to be able to open this. So here it goes. So this bulge seems like it's not actually a storage compartment, rather it's just a continuation of the seat. It's a seat cover. So if you unscrew a couple of screws from back here, you can remove it and you can actually seat 2 people on it. It's the pillion seat cover, converting this to a single rider motorcycle. So that's what that is. Okay, good to know, good to know. Now, underneath this seat, you're gonna see this black box. When you remove it, it's the toolbox to this motorcycle. So instead of being strapped down with like a rubber band, it's actually placed in a little box where I guess you can remove the toolbox and instead put some other things in here. If you need to, if you need a little bit of storage, this is probably your only opportunity. Other than that, there is literally no room to store anything under the 2025 ZX-14R. And with all of that out of the way, I think you and I are ready to take this motorcycle out on the road and give it a try. But before we do that, a huge shout out to Bellevue Motorsports for allowing us this opportunity to swing our leg over the 600-pound brand new $18,000 motorcycle, so you guys can have a better idea what this has and doesn't have, so you can be more informed when you show up to the dealership to sign the papers and buy a motorcycle like this. I'll leave a link to this bike in the description section of this video, and again, a big shout out to Bellevue Motorsports. Let's go and ride this bike. All right, let's go. So no quick shifter on this motorcycle. As we discussed, it is overall a pretty outdated platform. And, I made a video of the, what's it called? The Suzuki Gixxer 750 recently, not too long ago. And that motorcycle is an absolute fossil of a bike, okay? And people love it. Everybody was praising it in the comment section that, that's exactly what we need, a bike that's completely void of technology. So, is that a downside on this motorcycle? I don't think so. People seem to... People really seem to like this lack of technology. It's a pendulum swing. When bikes didn't have anything on them, people wanted everything on them, and now that they have everything on them, people want nothing to be loaded on their motorcycle. And this is the bike you're getting. That's exactly why Kawasaki didn't put any the strong bundle of creature comfort features on this motorcycle. There are no cruise controls, no grip warmers, there's no adjustable windscreen. There is even no launch control like we talked. There's nothing. And so, there's no TFT screen up here either. You just have this basic LCD. Even though it's a pretty comprehensive one and it shows you everything, it's still an LCD. Buried under this glass, watch glass kind of looking compartment, about an inch inset, which is pretty cool. I wonder if they're imitating some sort of a vehicle from the olden days. I don't know if it's mimicked after a design that I'm not aware of, but yeah, looks like a church window. Like 4 windows, little windows here, 4 more windows here, and a large one in the center. Looks like the windows outside of the Chrysler building. But anyways, yeah, all to say that lack of technology here is meant to be the way it is. Kawasaki has the funds and the team of scientists and engineers to really go to town with this motorcycle, but they just don't, because they don't want. Now, would the existence of stuff like cruise control and quick shifter especially be helpful on this motorcycle? Of course, you know, especially if they are built in a way that you can disable them, so you get the benefit of having and not having them, depending on what you feel like on that particular ride. Man, the power of this motor, let's talk about that for a second. My daily rider motorcycle is a Ninja H2. So I come from it's ECU flashed, and it's got the titanium exhaust system on it with no catalytic converters or anything. So I'm getting close to 300 horsepower on that motorcycle. I do feel the difference that this motorcycle is slightly older than my daily rider, but I mean, not older, slower than my current daily rider, but it is not a slow bike at all. It's scary fast. I'm just used to a slightly faster machine, so I'm not blown away as much as probably you would be. Coming from virtually any other motorcycle, you would have your mind blown here by how quick and agile this 600-pound motorcycle is. And motorcycles like this and Hayabusa and the older 1100 XX Blackbird from Honda, these motorcycles have a particular, what's it called, a cult following. These are pretty established motorcycles. Another reason why manufacturers don't want to change them up too much. Hayabusa is still being made exactly the way it was. There's absolutely no update made to it. This motorcycle hasn't been updated since 2012. The Blackbird, of course, is discontinued. That one's out. But the name of the game here is staying true to what the cult followers want from this motorcycle, and adding those features will drastically drop, make the audience much smaller than it really already is. That's why it's outdated. That's why things look old on this 2025 motorcycle. I think when I sit on this motorcycle, I do not think I am living in 2025. It is old. Even for 2012 standards, I would say it's slightly old. But yeah, you pay good money for it though. $17,500 is not a little. It's not little. That's still a lot of money. That is more expensive than the ZX-10R is currently, which is a much more advanced motorcycle, much more track oriented. You see, that was another downside of this motorcycle, is that due to its weight, it's not really trackable. Is what everybody says, at least. Let me tell you that. Everybody says, oh, this motorcycle is not a good motorcycle on the track. I am testing it right now. It's my first time getting on a 600-pound super sport, hyper sport motorcycle. And I'm gonna tell you, this is not a tough bike to ride. It looks much nimbler than it is. Like, I'm sitting on it, and I can throw it around. Make U-turns like you just saw up there. Whoa, nice Lamborghini. Make U-turns easily on it, throw it around. It's a quick bike. I don't really understand this whole concept of, oh, a certain bike is not a good track bike. Are we comparing every motorcycle to the benchmark of a MotoGP motorcycle? Is that why we call some motorcycles not track worthy? Because
that's our idea of what a track bike should be. If that's the case, yes, so this motorcycle is a little heavier and harder to maneuver, but really, like, that's not the only type of track riding you do out on the track. That's a complaint I hear about this motorcycle, the Hayabusa. I hear about the Ninja H2 even. These are not truly track-oriented bikes, and they always come from like Ducati riders, like Panigale riders, and they're high horse. Like, these bikes are not good track bikes because they're heavy. First of all, most of those people who say that don't even take their Ducatis to the track. So if your bike is so track worthy, hasn't even seen a track in its entire life, have you seen a track in your entire life? So all to say that this is an absolutely fine machine to take to the track. It will take corners easily. It'll come out of corners very easily. It's not like you are physically lifting a 600-pound motorcycle out of the corner. Inertia is doing, laws of physics are doing all the work. So who cares if this is a 400-pound motorcycle or a 600-pound motorcycle? When you're at high speed, the bike, it feels light anyways. But of course, you can take this to drag racing. The one thing that, I don't know, maybe drag racers do or don't need is the launch control. You can tell me, if you go drag racing a lot, is launch control something you actually use? Does it set faster records when you do have it on, or is it just a little bit of a novelty nobody uses in the real world application of it? This motorcycle doesn't have launch control. It has that, you know, engage mode light. Would you be okay with that, with no launch control and just the engage mode light to go drag racing this motorcycle? Let me know in the comment section. Overall, this is a super fun bike. Obviously, we don't get to you know, put many miles on it because somebody else needs to come buy this motorcycle. But in this brief little ride that I just did, I love this bike, and I don't think it feels any heavier than my daily ride at the Ninja H2. Like, I'm going in circles right now, and it's perfectly fine. Oh yeah, I love this. Making tight turns, easy. Yeah, I don't really see the complaint that it's heavy, not manageable easily. It's super nimble when you're actually moving on it. Let's go to the Emi Score.
And now onto the Emi Score for the 2025 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-14R. In the commuter category, you get ABS, which can save your butt, and selectable power modes to tame the bike's behavior in stop-and-go urban riding. The seat is plush and comfortable, a plus for daily commuting. But it's not all good news. Fuel efficiency is poor thanks to that massive displacement. There's no elaborate TFT screen, limiting the ride data you get on the go, though the classic analog digital dash is still a treat to look at. You also won't find a USB outlet anywhere or phone connectivity option, so if you're headed out on longer rides, you'll need to invest in a phone mount. The riding ergonomics aren't exactly relaxed, but they're definitely more comfortable than something like a ZX-6R. Pricing sits at $17,600, which I'm starting to think might be a little bit too steep for what you're getting. At this price, you could get a Kawasaki ZX-10R, a far more advanced and modern machine, which goes just as fast, if not faster. On the plus side, it's a Kawasaki, which means great reliability, easy parts availability, and strong dealership support. The bike scores a 13 out of 20 in the commuter category. As far as performance and dope factor category goes, the ZX-14R comes with 3 levels of traction control, an engage mode light, which is a budget-friendly stand-in for launch control, fully adjustable suspension, and Brembo brakes. At 593 pounds, it's hefty, typical for the hypersport category. However, it's 10 pounds heavier than the Suzuki Hayabusa, but it's got a bigger engine. You get about 180 horsepower at the rear wheel and about 116 foot-pounds of torque. In terms of design and market presence, the ZX-14R is an icon. It doesn't need a facelift or dramatic updates. Fans want it exactly as it is. Kawasaki only changes the color each year, and for 2025, you get just one choice. It gets a 12 out of 20 for the performance and dope factor category, and it sits here on the list of other sport bikes I have reviewed. Maybe this bike isn't selling like it used to because the market's shifting, or maybe it's because riders don't know where it fits anymore. Do riders these days prefer lightweight corner carvers over big, powerful do-it-all machines? Because make no mistake, this is still one of the sweetest bikes out there. So what do you think? Has the era of these big block motorcycles gone? Or is there still a place for the ZX-14R? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.